Welcome to SAM Conversation, a program of South Asia Monitor. Today we have the pleasure of welcoming Major Maroof Raza, the author of Contested Lands, book which I've had the pleasure of reading and reviewing. Contested Lands, India, China, and the Boundary Dispute. Maroof and I have enjoyed an old association with the Salute magazine, of which he's the publisher. And I'm a editorial consultant. There, as far as and he's written a lot on China. He's had a lot to comment on China. So have I. Now, what one thing we have to, if we just go over from 1962, that was history. The next step was 1967, when we had some skirmishes in Nathula and Chola, Sikkim. And when China lost almost about 400 personnel, we lost 67. And after that, China pressed very hard that let's not fire at each other. And they've taken such great advantage of this agreement, which we have followed, and they broke it once in Tulungla in 1975, when they killed 4 personnel of 5 Assam rifles, not by bullets but by torture. Then they broke it again in 2020, when they committed what can be loosely referred to as the second aggression. An aggression that too after polluting the world with their experiment in biological warfare. Was it an experiment or was it deliberate? I mean, it was. They've been experimenting for very long, but was it a leak which was accidental or deliberate? I think there's a lot of indication that it's the latter. Right from Aksai Chin, which they took, they've not returned. They've broken every agreement, and every agreement on peace and tranquility has been broken between May and June of 2020, and remains broken till date. This book has a preface by Ambassador Stobdan, Munchuk Stobdan, who's again a very good authority on the subject. And its introduction is by Iqbal Chand Malhotra, who I classify as a history hound. He's someone who's known for going deep into history and coming out with a lot of a lot of facts which haven't been which have not been known much. Maroof, please tell us what your latest edition of the Contested Lands, what is its its importance, because there's a lot of everything about China is important. And what all has what I leave it to you. I mean, let's start from there.
Okay, Col Bhat, good evening. You've been very kind with such a detailed introduction. Obviously, you're very knowledgeable. You've read so much. It's often very hard to reduce it into a few crisp sentences. But let me uh, take the reader or the viewer through three, four phases of this book. The first thing to note is that this book is not from 1962 onwards. 62 is a scar in our psyche. This book is from 1842 onwards. And from then on, the armies of Maharaja Ranjit Singh and then Zorawar Singh and others tried to make forays into Aksai Chin, which is extended part of Ladakh, east of Ladakh, which China regards as its own territory and we regard as our own. So the book explains that what was this thing about these maps and these lines. The new book that's come out, they had reached out to me, the publishers. They wanted to do another book because it sold so well. It was a bestseller. So I told them, I said, okay, but then make it paperback because it's more easily accessible to people in airports and other things. And we will give a new afterword, just like the afterword I wrote for Colonel Bhatt's book on bulletless borders. So afterward explained that what really went on behind the scenes in Ladakh when the Chinese intruded and there was panic buttons pushed in Delhi. Historically, even Chinese planting a few tents on the disputed boundary line would cause confusion right up to army headquarter level. And there are many levels of command. So this was something much bigger. And therefore, I feel, yes, the deaths of those 16 Bihar martyrs should not go unacknowledged. But also the fact is that they have managed to define a new phase in Sino-Indian relations. Because Chinese are good at wait and watch. There's a book by Ambassador Gokhale called The Waiting Game, and in which what they do is they just keep making you wait and they keep talking to you, and they look for soft spots in your armor. The second thing about this book is that it explains in a fairly brutal, honest way all the faux pas that we have created. 62 wasn't something that happened in 1962. It was building up from the 50s. And the Chinese were getting very edgy about India's ongoing relationship with the US. They were getting very edgy about India supporting the Tibetans, both logistically and through military weapon systems. And one of the consignments of weapon systems was signed by Lieutenant Colonel Sam Manekshaw. And that also reached the Tibetans. So these were being given. Now, Nehru claimed that he did not have much knowledge of it. So I don't know what kind of uh, a ministry he was, or cabinet he was running, that was partly keeping him in the dark. Just like when the Dalai Lama walked across from Tibet into India, there was an officer of the Foreign Office, Mr. Menon, who was there to receive him. He was the uncle of the former Foreign Secretary, Shiv Shankar Menon. And if a senior officer of the Foreign Office is there to receive him, then how is it that the Nehru government didn't know about him? So there were a lot of things that was left in unsaid in a confusing way. The Chinese
Not
definitely
only that,
resented.
the 5 Assam rifles escorted him in. And
Yeah, yeah.
before
In fact,
the
in Salute
photographs.
magazine, we did a cover. We did a cover of Dalai Lama being given a guard of honor
Guard of
by
honor.
five Assam
Yes,
rifles.
yes,
So
yes.
the fact is that this book really, initially I began to read about China because so much of China was happening on television and I needed to keep myself informed. But the more I read, the more I researched, the more I realized there is so much information and I know so little. So at least let me put together a simple page turner of a 200-page book, which will give you from the history, the various maps. A diplomat asked me in the IIC a year ago, have you shown the 1959-60 line? I said, yes, I've shown a map which has the 59-60 line, which is where the Chinese claims were after the fighting that took place in Ladakh. So they said, okay, we're ready to settle our claims there. But this is an old Chinese claim on it because the Chinese have historically again and again gone back that you're not going to get everything you ask for. We're not going to get everything we ask for. So let's have a swap agreement. So the swap agreement was something that Nehru was against, but certainly there were many in the Foreign Office who were open to it. A senior diplomat confided to me that the swap agreement nearly got implemented after Nehru's death, except one senior diplomat said that we shouldn't be disloyal to Nehru's memory, so let's set it aside. So the Chinese have also been rubbed the wrong way. And the fact of the matter is, as far as Aksai Chin goes and McMahon line goes, there are the two areas of dispute. Aksai Chin, as you all know, is right as you look at the map of India of Ladakh or east of Ladakh, is that whole territory. It was not really under anybody's control till the 1950s. So that, the law of international land acquisition and borders is what you grab is you hold. If it's not yours, it'll become yours over a period of time. So the Chinese were there. Krishna Menon sent a reconnaissance mission there, led by Captain Rajendra Nath, who later became General Rajendra Nath. And they came back with very, very insightful findings. But their report was put uh, in the locker, and it still lies closed in the locker. But basically, they said that the Chinese are already there, and we must prepare for getting back at them, or at least prepare to stall further incursions. Then, on the McMahon line side, you see the whole conference in Shimla, 1913, 1914, that took place, that tried to define the southern boundaries of Tibet. The problem with the Britishers were the northern boundaries of Tibet, China would take care. The southern boundaries of Tibet, where did they end? Where did India begin? So they came up after much debate with the Tibetan representatives of the Dalai Lama, and they finally created something called the McMahon line. Henry McMahon was a man who had a reputation for drawing lines. He had earlier in the time of the British Raj drawn the Durand line, which separates Pakistan with Afghanistan. So he got frustrated finally after 6 or 7 meetings and pulled out a big map and put it on the table. And he said, gentlemen, here it is. And he drew a line. And it was a thick felt pen. Now, a thick felt pen on a quarter-inch map can be translated into kilometers on a metric map or a 1-inch map. So confusion still exists that what is your defined boundary? Is it on that side of the black line or this side of the black line, which McMahon drew? So there's that problem. And then China decided, the biggest problem for China was two other things. One was Indian Air Force reconnaissance missions by Wing Commander Jaggi Nath, who was then squad leader. Really unnerved the Chinese. He got a Mahavir Chakra eventually. I've seen his plane in the Palam Museum, and it's been shot at many times by the Chinese when he flew over the Chinese territories. But he took a whole lot of photographs. But Jaggi Nath tells me, and he also told Claude R.P., the famous sinologist, that he went with the air chief to meet Krishna Menon. Krishna Menon didn't even want to talk to him. He just told him, "Have you seen the Chinese?" He said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Okay, go." And here's a guy who put his life on the line with more than 20, 30 missions photographing. The other thing that worried the Chinese is that these photographs would be getting India the details of the Chinese nuclear facilities in Lopingo. And those nuclear photographs would be transported from India to London, London to Washington. And Washington would use that as an opportunity to destroy Chinese nuclear program before it fructified. This program was a deal between Mao Zedong and initially Stalin, Khrushchev, and then Stalin. And they said, Mao Zedong said, "I'll crawl in front of you, but give me nuclear weapons because that's what I need to be a world power." So the Russians decided to give them after China's uh, huge manpower losses in the Korean War, where they fought for the Russians. So all that is documented in the book. Everything is footnoted. Everything is based on published documents. I'm not saying a source told me this and a source told me that. I don't write like that. It has to be authenticated with something in the public domain. And therefore, Nehru and his top advisors, Mr. Krishna Menon, his other advisor was National Security and Intelligence Advisor, Mr. I think his name was Mathai. And they were all very clear that India should fall into the American trap and become an American flunky. Nehru wanted to avoid that. So Nehru fouled up on his judgment of China on the border areas, though he did get a border arrangement for us with all these small countries that are on the border with China: Nepal, Bhutan, Sikkim. That time Sikkim was independent, and even Arunachal was again a point of dispute. So, but they all signed treaties with India. So they became a buffer of India against Chinese expansion. But Chinese thought that before Nehru becomes too big for his boots, let them cut him down cut him down in his height. So they decided to attack by saying, it's like the joke that how did Hitler enter Poland? By saying, "I'm not entering." And the same thing, the Chinese decided to attack us, and that led to the 62 war. Of course, the forward posts and the forward patrolling and all those issues are nitty-gritties of military tactics.
Thank you, Maroof, giving us some good background. But now, what is, what irks a lot is that in 1967, it got proved very, very clearly that the Chinese soldier then, or the Chinese PLA, People's Liberation Army, is not really got a stomach to fight. That is why, after they had to deal with about 400 odd body bags, and look at the way they took advantage of this. In 2020, when they came with those crude ancient barbaric damned weapons. They are building up. They're building up like nobody's business. Look at how they built up in Arunachal, and we are trying to we're trying hard to keep abreast. It's costing us a lot. It's costing them a lot, but in their case, they don't give a damn. What irks is that despite our having the capability of as well as armed as we were in 67, we haven't even thought about taking back what this government hasn't. We keep repeating, "Oh, they've not got an inch of territory," and we keep repeating it. How long will this carry on? How long will you carry on this business of, managing a border by mukkebazi, grappling, pushing, pulling, fisticuffs of stones and and staves and what have you. They've ordered maces, electronic maces also. I mean, for
Okay.
um,
Okay. So your question has two, three parts to it. The last part being, how long will it carry on this way? The earlier part being, has China learned any lessons from its engagement with India? And the geostrategic part being that where do Indo-China relations go? So quite clearly, the Chinese do acknowledge the grit and the determination of the Indian soldier. It is the Indian politician that they are targeting. They wanted to teach Nehru a lesson, so the country had to be attacked. And here they again want, see, I wrote a piece also in the Tribune to say that, 1962 deja vu, which meant that Xi, like Mao, is very powerful. Modi, like Nehru, is very powerful. So is it another repeat of 62, where this is when the intrusions took place in Galwan and those areas? Now, second thing is that we need to understand that they are not going to give away any part of Aksai Chin to us. They were willing to accept the McMahon line as a boundary between India and China. That happened in Chow Enlai's visit. That happened subsequently also. But in Aksai Chin's case, they said that there is no agreement, and they are right on that. There is no agreement which was signed and sealed and announced. They kept exchanging maps also, and that also exchange of maps took place in a shifty manner. It didn't happen in a straightforward manner that you put the map across on the table and say, listen, this is what I regard as my boundary line. What is your boundary line? And what surprises me, that in 62, when they went to settle the boundary dispute, they captured much more area than what is their claim line even now. They came much forward of the claim line, 5960 claim line of Aksai Chin. They came right up to Tawang and even wanting to go down to Assam side. And then they suddenly packed up and went without insisting, in war. Sir, you've been a soldier, I've been a soldier. In war, we are taught that what you gain, you hold. And then you negotiate from a position of strength. They didn't hold. They went back to where they had earlier dug their trenches, and it was kind of a sort of field firing exercise for them. So that was the second thing. And the third point was that masons and all those things that were used, which your book brings out in great detail, is about this nonsense about bulletless border management. There was no bulletless border management. China was distracted with lots of other things to be able to focus too much on trying to capture territory from India. But Aksai Chin is very important to them. It holds massive reserves of uranium and water. The Russians were using that uranium to create their first nuclear explosion north of Aksai Chin in a place called Semipalatinsk. And Mao extracted uranium from there also for his nuclear program, because Loknor is on the other side, south of Aksai Chin. So there, and the highway, that highway G219, which runs from Kashgar to Aksai Chin to Lasha, is a highway that is being built not for convenience of the local people there or the people, population of Xinjiang and Tibet. It's been built to transport material for their nuclear program. So Aksai Chin, they're not going to give away. Water is very important. Aksai Chin is the catchment area for 5 or 6 major rivers, which lead to dams. And dams give the water that is necessary for making silicon wafers. So therefore,
even
Aksai Chin,
Iqbal Malhotra has written quite a bit about
Iqbal
this.
originally came up with this finding, and he's right. I've double checked on it. And water at 10,000 liters of fresh water added with desert sand of Taklamakan Desert leads you to create 30 centimeters square of silicon wafer, which makes microchips. So why would China give away? Because India has made some presumptuous map कि पहले से 800 से हमारा था. अरे यार तुम्हारा था तो were you there? I asked people in India. Were you there in occupation in Aksai Chin till 1960? You were not, except
No.
you had one or two posts of Maharaja of Kashmir in Haji Langar and one or two places where trading posts were there. That also people used to vacate in cold weather and go away. You want to hold on to something, Kargil is a case in point. You be there cold or summer, and we weren't there. And when we told the government, the military told the government, we need to get more proactive. Initial response of Panditji was, the police can handle the Chinese. Back to you, sir.
Well, I don't know. There's one of the very latest books on China is by Major General Ashok Kumar. China betrays again. He has tries to make a point that the deployment of that increased deployment, heightened deployment of China in Arunachal is going to be is going to hurt them more than us, because
Yeah.
our troops can we are probably the toughest group of troops in the world, and acknowledged so in two world wars, uh, uh, but not so in their case. And it you think there is any I mean, and eventually, is there anything we will do to, at least if we can't take back Aksai Chin, at least what has been taken in 2020?
So I think I'm again going against the grain of common thought. I think the answer lies for us to be actively in defense. So what you call offensive defense,
Yes.
which means that jahan they try and show a little bit of adventurism,
We should do a
knock their
Sundarum
heads
Chu.
off and push them back.
We
But
should do a Sundarum Chu on them,
yes, Sumdurangchu was a case in point, but there was no physical interaction in Sumdurangchu. Only troops were flown in by helicopter and they
but
surrounded.
it was, I think, a brilliant message to
Yeah, yeah.
them. Let's see what
No,
you do now.
I've talked
Let's
about
see
it
what
in
you
my
do
book
now.
also. I talked about it in my book also, and General Sundarji was a mastermind at strategic activities.
No doubt.
So he did that, and it gave a message to China that, you see, strangely, every 20 years, we've taken them on and given them a bloody nose. 67, 87 Sungdrongchu, and then in the
In
2020, which
2020.
is more than that. So China has realized that India is not a pushover. And if a country one-tenth the size of India, Vietnam, can teach China a lesson or two in the 1979 Chinese invasion, why can't we?
And I don't know, with all this sign painting that they're doing in Arunachal, I think it's time we started referring to China as not to as China held Tibet. With Pakistan, China occupied Tibet, COT.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
We were, our foreign office had misplaced notions that we didn't want to say anything offensive to China, which they could rub our nose on the ground with Kashmir. But Kashmir is ours, it's not going away. Though
yeah.
China is 20-25% occupational control of Kashmiri land, Jammu and Kashmir, the state of Jammu and Kashmir, Aksai Chin and Ladakh and all that, and with Shaksgam Valley with China, they have a lot of control over Kashmir and its waters. But we've been very sensitive, just like we don't want to open an office of Taiwan in India and let them issue visas here. because people from Taiwan who want to come to India for Buddhist pilgrimages to Bodh Gaya have to go to Hong Kong to go and get a visa. So, our foreign office, Mr.
No,
Jaishankar's
absolutely.
statements notwithstanding, but up till now, the foreign office has not colored itself in glory.
And it's time we did so. There's today it'll be the greatest tragedy when you have an armed force which is capable. Army, Navy, Air Force, all three of them. The Navy is also, that's you won't go into that. That's another.
But there are many other areas where you can contest the Chinese and spoil their plans, like their expansion strategy in Indian Ocean, like their expansion strategy in our neighborhood with Burma, Bangladesh, and with Pakistan, of course. So China's got more resources. It's going to put into it. And China wants to be the world's most important power by 2050. And that is what they're working towards. We've defined what we want to achieve in 2047, but it's not military centric. It's about us being an economic powerhouse. But China has got deep pockets. It's putting money into Maldives' hands. It's putting money into various countries like Burma and there. But we still tend to be nice to these guys. So,
okay. Maroof, I think very briefly, if you just very briefly give us an idea about your afterward and who's penned it, and because we running short now.
The afterword in this book is by Lieutenant General Pannu, who's a dear friend, and who was also the Corps Commander in Leh. And General Pannu is now into many academic forays. And I asked him to spell out very clearly what would we have done if we had reacted differently to Chinese incursions, and what were our limitations to reaction to Chinese incursions, and what were Chinese capabilities, how far is their browbeating going to be taken seriously, or how far are they really from becoming a superpower.
Thank you, Maroof. We wish you happy writing, and more in China. And I mean, let's hope we get further and get there. Get them by their short hairs. Simple. All the best.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.